proven that.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines. The United Arab Emirates says it was pulling out its remaining forces in Yemen after Saudi Arabia backed a call for UAE forces to leave the country within 24 hours. US military says that the United States and its partner forces killed or captured nearly 25 Islamic State operatives since it launched retaliatory strikes in Syria earlier this month. Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed Iran's nuclear program with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian in a phone call, as per the Kremlin press service. A federal judge blocked plans by US President Donald Trump's administration to end temporary protections from deportation that had been granted to hundreds of South Sudanese nationals living in the US. US President Donald Trump says he is not concerned about China's military drills around Taiwan, calling them long-standing naval exercises. The comments came as Beijing staged blockade-style maneuvers near the island, blocking a large US arms sale to Taiwan. India overtakes Japan to become the world's fourth largest economy with a size of $4.18 trillion. The government cited inflation remaining below the lower tolerance, declining unemployment and improving export performance as key indicators. Meta Platforms is buying AI startup Manus to deepen its push into agentic AI, aiming to embed the technology across its platforms as competition for next-gen AI intensifies. SoftBank Group has completed its $40 billion investment in OpenAI, citing people familiar with the matter, marking one of the largest private funding rounds ever and deepening founder Masayoshi Son's bet on AI. And viewers, the United States and allied forces have killed or captured nearly 25 Islamic State operatives in Syria following a series of retaliatory strikes. This is confirmed by the US military. The operations came after an attack on American personnel earlier this month. On December 19, the US launched large-scale air and ground strikes targeting dozens of Islamic State locations across Syria. According to US Central Command, at least 7 ISIS fighters were killed, with the remaining terrorists captured during missions conducted between December 20 and 29. The operations also destroyed 4 weapon caches belonging to the group. CENTCOM said these missions demonstrate ongoing vigilance against ISIS threats in the region and highlight the continued partnership with local forces to prevent further attacks. I now request Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev to join me in this discussion. He is a former diplomat from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sachdev, for joining me in this discussion. And now it is good that at least 25 operatives have been held, but is this going to completely quell the menace of ISIS, carrying out asymmetric warfares in different parts of the world? What more do you think should be done to address this?
Thank you for having me. I think the short answer to your question is no, it's not going to be enough to quell ISIS, the activities throughout the world. You'd recall that only last week Americans missiled ISIS bases in Nigeria as well. This shows that 5,000 odd kilometers between Syria and Nigeria, there's ISIS still around. And I don't think it's these sporadic acts are going to be enough. I think these are hardened guerrillas. They are on the ground, and they're not going to be dissuaded or diminished or obliterated by aerial activities such as missiles and aircraft bombings.
Do you then foresee more such strikes coming in, because some believe that it's only the first of many in the area?
I think President Trump has been quite sophisticated in his responses. He has avoided sending boots on the ground,
Yeah,
either in Nigeria or in
Syria.
Middle East. And I think he has made those token bombing raids or missile raids partly to assuage or propitiate his MAGA Christian base at home,
Yeah.
uh, and partly to be seen as a strong person retaliating against killing of three of American soldiers, uh, which was the raids on ISIS in Syria in response to. But he has criticized forever wars being waged by his predecessors, and he apparently has no intention of doing so himself.
All right, sure, Ambassador Sachdev. Thanks for your perspective there, but I request you to stay on as we proceed. Views Saudi Arabia and the United States, in fact, beg your pardon, the UAE is now saying that it is pulling out its remaining forces in Yemen after Saudi Arabia backed the call for UAE forces to leave the country within 24 hours. The move followed a Saudi-led coalition airstrike on the southern Yemeni port of Mukalla. The attack on what Riyadh says is a UAE-linked weapons shipment and marked the most significant escalation between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi to date in a widening rift between the two Gulf powers, declaring its national security a red line. Saudi Arabia earlier alleged that the UAE had pressured Yemen's southern separatists to conduct military operations that had breached the kingdom's borders. And I request a comment here from Ambassador Sachdev.
I think this is a very far-reaching development and indicates widening of the rift between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi as far as the Red Sea region or Bab el-Mandeb region is concerned.
Yeah.
If you, a closer look at the map would show, firstly, that the area that STC, Southern Transitional Council, has taken over in the last 2 or 3 weeks, is quite a big swath of territory bordering Saudi Arabia and Oman, as well as the Gulf of Aden and Indian Ocean. This is sensitive in many ways. Firstly, it gives the Southern Transitional Council, which is backed by UAE, a direct border with Saudi Arabia and also with Oman. Secondly, this route has been used, overland route has been used in past to supply Iranian weapons to Houthi rebels, who have used them against Israel and in blockading the Red Sea for close over a year now. Thirdly, the STC is member of internationally recognized Yemeni ruling council, but which is backed by Saudi Arabia and notionally by UAE as well. But STC has been encouraged separately by funding and through weapon supplies to carve out its own territory by the UAE. I should also add that on the other side of the Gulf of Aden lies Somalia, which is where Somaliland has been recognized by Israel as the first country to have ever done so. UAE already has a naval base there. Then it comes to Sudan, where UAE is supporting the separatists. So basically, UAE's support to Southern Transitional Council, a separatist body in Yemen, mirrors UAE's support to Somaliland and UAE's support to RSF of Sudan, which is also a separatist body. This has alarmed Saudi Arabia because the Saudis are on the other side of the divide in Yemen. They back the Central Council, as I mentioned, uh, and in Somalia, they back Somali government
Yeah.
and not the Somaliland
Hmm.
separatists.
Hmm.
In Sudan, they back SAF, the military-run central government, and not RSF as backed by UAE. So this is not just a solitary case of Saudi and UAE having different backings in three separatist ridden countries of that region through which much of the global oil supplies go. And this worries Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia, more than UAE, is within the earshot of all these three separatist bodies,
Hmm.
which have backings of the UAE. And that makes it Saudis uh, see some sort of wider conspiracy. And the Yemeni STC, uh, they have yesterday bombed the ship that was bringing weapons,
Hmm.
etc., for STC
Yeah.
from UAE,
Hmm.
which is the first time such a thing has happened.
Hmm.
Now, the UAE seem to have uh, heeded the ultimatum and has decided to withdraw its forces, at least publicly, from Yemen.
Yeah.
So the STC backing may be withdrawn,
Hmm.
and that will make STC slightly more flexible with regard to Saudi demands.
Ambassador, would you say that if asked, the Saudi will be able to furnish sufficient evidence to justify its, attack on the ship that it says was actually carrying weapons?
Uh, it's a loaded question. I should say that evidence should be available through satellites, etc. But
Hmm.
it and the ground sort of surveillance. And Saudis would not have taken such a drastic step
Hmm.
of attacking a ship bringing UAE's hardware unless they were certain about it.
All right, and what do you think, in your opinion, how do STC's recent territorial gains in the two ports in Hadramaut and Al Mahra, they affect the balance of power, between the forces backed by Saudi and, on the other hand, the UAE aligned groups?
There are three major groups in Yemen. There are Al Houthis, which are the strongest in the
Hmm.
northern part of Yemen that borders Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
And Houthis and Saudis have had a longish battle for close to 6 or 7 years.
Hmm.
There is a ceasefire between the two, but Houthis got involved in Red Sea siege and also lobbing missiles at Israel to avenge for Hamas or Iran or Lebanon. Uh, Israelis have also bombed Houthis.
Hmm.
Second major group is STC, which is well funded and well armed and trained by the UAE.
Okay.
Third body, which is more administrative than military, is the uh, internationally recognized coalition government of Yemen, which is backed by Saudi Arabia and was for a long time based in Riyadh because Aden was controlled by STC. So, with all these three parties at loggerheads, the biggest beneficiaries would be the Houthis, who are still licking their wounds after brushed up with Israel and United States. But they and Iran, their backer, has been mauled by the war with the Americans and Israelis. So it will give them some free space to operate. STC is militarily capable, and it will remain to be seen how UAE would actually withdraw or would only do it on surface, and the backing to STC from UAE, which is quite substantive, would continue. Thirdly, the pressure would now mount on Saudi Arabia to back up the internationally recognized federal government of Yemen, which has been weak and mostly on paper. So that is where Saudis do not want to get involved in Yemen all over again.
All
Yemen
right.
was said to be their Vietnam, and Saudi cities were bombed by Houthis, etc., over past decade. So they were able to extricate themselves with great deal of effort and diplomacy. Uh, so it remains to be seen
Sure.
whether the withdrawal by UAE under duress of Saudi pressure would lead to STC behaving in a more flexible manner as a component of the council ruling Yemen with Saudi backing. And if it comes back to that fold, situation could improve.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sachdev, then for joining us and explaining that to our viewers. And with that, viewers, we are now going to proceed to cover some news from Turkey. Now, in a recent post on X, the Turkish Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya has announced that 357 people were arrested in nationwide operations against the IS group, ISIS. The arrests took place across 21 provinces during simultaneous police actions which were conducted earlier today, targeting suspects linked to the ISIS. The crackdown follows a deadly clash yesterday at Yalova, where reportedly 3 police officers were killed and 6 Islamic State members were also neutralized. All of the 6 ISIS members were Turkish nationals. Authorities say that they acted on intelligence indicating the group was planning attacks during Christmas and New Year celebrations, leading to the arrest of 137 suspected members in Istanbul last Thursday. It is important to note that Turkey shares a long border with Syria, where the jihadist group continues to operate. And I request Mark Sutherland, who is a geopolitical commentator, to join me here in this discussion with his comments.
Pretty good to be with you, and what a wonderful guest you just had on before me. So good shout out there.
Sure, thanks.
The issue is this. It's looking at what Turkey has been up to in regard to Syria and the backing of the overthrow of Assad. That's the first thing that we have to note here. And the fact that they're backing of the present now ex-member of Al-Qaeda, well, that's what he says, who's now then trying to rule Syria. because there are various parts of it that are in very big fluid movement, and we have to remember the various jihadist groups that have come against the Druze, come against the Christians and the Alawites in the southern part of Syria. We then have to go back and remember that ISIS, at one point from 2014, 2019, which I know a few years there and a big gap, then held huge swathes of Iraq and Syria. Now we then come back up to the modern day, and under Erdogan's backing and helping to push, we could then argue that Syria should be viewed as greater Turkey. And it comes down to how ISIS views its how it wants to conduct itself in the Middle East, and also Al Qaeda from the past. And ISIS has seen to some commentators historically and looking at investigative work over a number of years as causing greater instability, and that does not go down well with, in my own humble opinion, Erdogan, who would then like to see the caliphate come back and would like to be sultan. This is what we're dealing with. Kriti.
Mark, isn't there now enough evidence to suggest that the caliphate that was indeed taken down in 2019 is now rebuilding itself? Turkey has arrested these many, at least 357. Trump is saying, and the US forces are saying, that 25 operatives were, held in Syria. We had the incidents that we saw in Bondi Beach. Philippines already has some ISIS elements, reportedly. So would you say this, sufficient evidence to suggest that it is indeed growing in numbers, its operatives?
There are a lot of mixed messages also within lining, and the awful, appalling incident that we witnessed, the murdering of Jews in Australia, 15 on Bondi Beach, 2 weeks ago, or just over that. The other evidence which you have raised is really, really important that we do look at, and we have to get behind the headlines, because there are mixed messages also coming out of the we could argue out the Trump administration, and we're just on the end of Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu just visiting President Trump in Mar-a-Lago, and all the implications of that, and all the outspill of that. Also, your wonderful guest before me explaining what is going on within that region. And also, as a reminder, we have the terrorist groups with ISIS. We also then have to look at historically their links with, I believe, Boko Haram in Nigeria, et al. And you raised this in your comments, and we have to be really, really on our toes and alert to this in what is going on behind the headlines and who is suddenly realigning with who, because we've seen so much realignment and movement within the Middle East after Hamas decided to come over a border and attack Israel on the 7th of October 2023 in the way it did. Kriti.
Mark, who do you think is also bolstering these ISIS elements? You did talk about Boko Haram, but which other fringe elements do you think are there, or non-state actors that are actually help them carry out these attacks?
Well, again, we then have to, I would say, we have to follow the money. And as someone who has been looking into Qatar and knowing other incredible people that have been looking into that country for many years, there is one place there that we have to go to and look at follow the money and see what they are up to. We also have to ideologically understand that it's from an ideological point of view, the fight between and the understanding within Islam between Sunni and Shiite. This is what we are then dealing with. People then turn around and say, I follow this prophet, I follow that prophet. There are all those other aspects of interpretation. There are all those other aspects that have to be looked at. But in regard to the money and what's gone on, I end up saying that we really have to focus on Qatar. We then have to focus on the Muslim Brotherhood, and we have to focus particularly, within all this area, within the Middle East, within the West, we have to focus on these bodies and what they have been up to, and just finally, with Qatar's investment in universities and education systems in the West and elsewhere is something that we're very, very aware of. And as you talked about, I think where the two terrorists who were shooting in Bondi Beach, where they'd gone for their training. All this is now coming up as the evidence that we are looking at in how all these things are connected. Kriti.
Yes, thank you, Mark, again for your comments, but once again requested to stay on. Viewers, now Eurostar has advised passengers to delay travel after power supply problems caused major disruption in the Channel Tunnel. Services at both Folkestone and Calais terminals have been temporarily suspended, affecting trains between London, Paris, Lille, Brussels and Amsterdam. Eurostar said trains that are running are facing severe delays and last-minute cancellations, urging passengers to check schedules before leaving or traveling. Officials are working to restore normal service, but the disruption is expected to continue until the power issue is resolved. The problem stems from a failure in the overhead power supply in the tunnel, which requires technical intervention on the cables. Getlink, the tunnel operator, says train traffic will resume progressively once the issue is fixed. Meanwhile, significant vehicle queues of over 1 kilometer have been reported at the Calais terminal as cars and trucks wait for shuttle services to restart. Travelers are also advised to stay updated via Eurostar's website and customer service channels. And Mark, if you're still with us, do help us explain, if you know much more than us, the situation on the ground there. How are the passengers who are stranded being serviced as of now? What are the alternative routes, and what really has caused this power outage that's taking these many hours to be fixed?
News than you have just talked about, but the comments would be this, which is extremely. I feel very sad for the passengers that are held up. This is not easy, especially as has been reported that some people nearly got on the train with their car, and that people are always then looking at where the local machine is to get crisp or get some food or even toilet facilities. This doesn't bode well, especially in the Christmas festive season for people then wanting to get on Eurostar and travel to Paris. In regard to suddenly on an extremely, extremely important transport route from the UK to Europe, to then have a power cut is within supposedly inverted commas first world countries. This is extremely questionable to me, and then I'm asking that question, what has actually gone on? Because people need to be very carefully keeping an eye on this. They know that there's going to be a huge traffic in regard to passengers wanting to go to and from Europe to Paris, back to London. This is extremely important, and also bearing in mind I just wonder the sort of lunatic policies that the UK has in regard to power and where it gets power from. Is it on our side? Is that it? What about what's happening on the French side? The French have access to nuclear power stations. They seem to be a bit more grown up than we is. And also to bear in mind the deindustrialization of Europe. I don't have the answer specifically on the ground. All I know is that when we have this kind of principal transportation system shut down in this way, there are some very, very serious questions that need to be asked about this at this time. And just finally, Kriti, it always seems extremely sad to me that as people are about to get away on holiday, whether that's from Heathrow, Gatwick and other airports, then suddenly these disruptions appear, and you suddenly wonder, with this sort of green zealot mentality of policy, you just wonder if there's also, let's just keep disrupting people, and maybe they just give up traveling. I don't know. Some people might call me a conspiracy theorist on that, but that's their opinion, and also I'm entitled to mine. Kriti.
All right, absolutely. Well, thanks, Mark, then for your opinion here and for joining us at NewsX World. And with that, viewers, let's tell you some more news that's coming in. Now, Poland's government has approved a bill introducing cohabitation contracts for couples living together, marking limited recognition for same-sex unions. The measures come in one of the few European Union countries with restrictive LGBT rights. Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who took office in 2023, promising reforms on abortion and LGBT rights, has faced resistance from his conservative coalition partner and veto threats from previous right-wing presidents. Officials hope the bill will gain parliamentary approval. The law would allow couples of any gender to sign contracts as a notary, covering housing rights, alimony, healthcare access, care leave, and joint taxes. However, same-sex marriages remain banned. LGBT groups criticized the bill as insufficient but acknowledged it may be the only proposal likely to pass in the current political climate. Public support for legal recognition is growing, but Poland remains among the European Union's most restrictive states. And moving on now, Roberto Carlos Alvarez, known as El Generente, has arrived at Jose Joaquin de Olmedo International Airport in Guayaquil after being arrested in the United Arab Emirates. Alvarez was wanted by the Ecuadorian authorities for the killing of 11 soldiers and is now identified as the head of the Border Commands. The Border Commands is a dissident faction of the now defunct Colombian guerrilla group FARC that rejected the 2016 peace agreement. Earlier this year, around 80 soldiers conducting an operation against illegal mining in the Ecuadorian Amazon were attacked by the guerrillas, leaving 11 soldiers and 1 militant dead and 1 soldier wounded. We now turn to what the Ecuadorian Interior Minister has said about Alvarez's arrest and the implications for national security.
Hoy hemos llevado a cabo otra exitosa operación y un golpe importante contra el crimen organizado. Roberto Carlos Álvarez Vera, alias Gerente, otro que se creía intocable, cabecilla del Grupo Internacional Armado Comandos de la Frontera, pensó que la impunidad y su vida de lujos en el extranjero sería el desenlace de su trama. Uno de los delincuentes más violentos y peligrosos de la región fue localizado, capturado y asegurado en Dubái. Este sujeto de 45 años de edad, además de ser el cabecilla del grupo mencionado de esta organización criminal de carácter transnacional, se encuentra vinculado directamente con el ataque terrorista perpetrado contra 11 militares ecuatorianos el 9 de mayo.
And Spain has granted Airbus exceptional permission to produce aircraft and drones using Israeli technology at its Spanish plants, even though it banned military and dual-use products from Israel 2 months ago over its war in Gaza. Approved last Tuesday by the cabinet and defended by several ministers this week, the exemption reflects the pressure from companies and domestic interests that some of Europe's toughest critics of Israel's recent war have surfaced as they attempt to impose trade sanctions. Spain in September passed a law to take urgent measures to stop the genocide in Gaza, banning trade in defense material and dual-use products from Israel, as well as imports and advertising of products originating from illegal Israeli settlements. Its consumer ministry ordered 7 tourist accommodation websites to remove 138 advertisements for holiday homes in occupied Palestinian territories or face the threat of sanctions in Spain. As per reports, Spain has already blocked 200 attempts to buy material linked to Israel. And that's a wrap on the NewsX World Report. Thanks for staying tuned for all international news and updates.